Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida. How are you?
I'm well, Gary. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you're well too.
Thank you. I'm delighted you accepted this invitation today as we celebrate Older Americans Month. Now, you've been in Congress since 2005, currently representing the 23rd Congressional District. But what I have always appreciated about you over the last 20 years is your steadfast support and being a stalwart on most of all the significant progressive issues facing this country. You've risen to the leadership of a DNC, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're on committees that touch every aspect of American life. And you're also someone that have had your own challenges that has informed your passion, your purpose, and your beliefs. As I mentioned to you offline, I've always seen you as this sort of stalwart, right? This aggressive fighter for causes you believed in. But your health challenges has created, for me, when I saw you the last time at the Concordia event at Miami, where you were interviewing Nancy Brinker, founder of the Susan Komen Foundation. That interview really touched me because for the first time, I wanted our folks to see this, I saw vulnerability, I saw humility, and I saw tremendous grace. And when I cornered you in the hallway and we talked.
In the nicest possible way.
Of course. You were almost emotional when I was talking to you about my observation of you over the years. And I work in a community and with a population that is always trying to find people like you in our corner. People who are challenged by ageism, by sexism, by racism, trying to be included and not marginalized. That's the population that we represent through our workforce programs. And before I get into the questions, which are from all over the country, let me offer a few statistics that will give you a sense of what Older American Month means. When Older Americans Month came into law, signed into law by John F. Kennedy in 1963, there were 17 million older Americans in this country. By 2023, there are 54 million older Americans, 65 and over, in this country. If we include those who are 50 and over, people like you and I, that number increases to 117 million Americans, 1/3 of the population. Significant numbers. And according to the AARP, older Americans by themselves would become the world's third largest economy, supporting 88.6 million jobs. You are at ground zero on aging and migration. And I think you can offer a perspective that I think folks around the country would benefit from as we try to figure out how we can be a society, a fair society, an inclusive society that recognize the virtues and the merits of folks who have worked hard, sacrificed, and are now struggling to find their way back into the workforce or to be hired at their skill level. So that's the background, and we'll take many questions today, and you can answer as many of them as you please, the best way you can.
Thank you so much.
How about
if I can just share with you, and I appreciate your really kind words. As you heard at that Concordia Forum, I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 41 years old. And that was a little over 15 years ago now. And I will tell you that I appreciate the opportunity to focus on older Americans in this conversation, especially during Older Americans Month, because at 41, I think most people would not call themselves an older American. There is nothing like facing your own mortality with a cancer diagnosis that makes you feel and focus on the finite nature of one's life.
Yes.
And how much quality of life you have left in it. even at 41 years old. And so, I mean, for me, as someone who represents a population in Florida with the largest percentage of older Americans anywhere in the country, we we older Americans are our daily focus here in Florida, especially in South Florida.
Yes.
And so I'm really thrilled to have the chance to talk about their priorities today with you.
Well, thank you so much. So let's go to the questions.
Okay.
I have one from Florida, of all places. Hollywood, Florida.
My district.
Yes. As someone who's been around the block a few times, I'm keenly aware of the challenges facing older workers in today's job market. I'd like to know what specific measures you're taking to help folks in our district who are 50 or older and may be struggling to make ends meet.
Well, Julie, that's a really important question. I can answer it not only as your member of Congress, but also as Gary named a lot of categories that I fall into, but he didn't mention daughter. I am the daughter of an 81-year-old full-time solo practitioner CPA.
Wow.
And my dad, and who is at his desk every single day, continuing to work on returns for his clients and helping to manage their business challenges, and thankfully and actually particularly because he is so engaged every single day, using his mind and keeping himself focused and active. It's why his health is as good as it is, and his mental acuity has maintained that strength. And so ensuring that older Americans have the opportunity to be productive all the way through the life that they desire to be productive in terms of work is so critical. And so whether it's making sure that things like the senior community service employment program is alive and well and funded, because that provides job training and placement services to low-income adults who are older than 55. It focuses on digital literacy and technology skills. I'll tell you, there were a few years there where I had to be my dad's tutor when it came to his cell phone. Even initially, years ago, on when he needed computer skills that he didn't have. Today, he manages it all just fine, but it definitely required some training and assistance. And so making sure that we are providing that training, because there are career changes that are made by older Americans very often, and that upskilling is so essential. So focusing on programs in the Department of Labor, in the Department of Health and Human Services, and Housing and Urban Development, like the Digital Literacy Initiative, for example, which provides funding to community organizations that offer digital literacy training to older Americans and lower income individuals. Those are the kinds of things that are so important, so that we don't leave older Americans twisting in the wilderness, trying to figure it out for themselves.
Yes. You've operated under this philosophy since you were in the Florida Senate, that there's no task too small and no goal too big. And I chuckled when I read that, because I think in your congressional career, that has been your mantra as well, right? To tackle big challenges and to help as many people as possible. Barbara from California, what role do you believe older workers can play in contributing to the economy and society as a whole? And how can we ensure that they are valued and respected for their contributions? That's Barbara from California.
Thank you. Well, Barbara, first we have to make sure that seniors, older Americans, forgive me, that older Americans have the safety nets in place to ensure that they can have an opportunity to thrive. So, I mean, for example, the fact that under President Biden's leadership with the Democratic majority in Congress last year, we were able to pass major legislation in the Inflation Reduction Act that lowered prescription drug costs for our seniors, that made sure that you could negotiate, that the federal government could negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to to lower those costs, capping at $2,000 a year in annual costs in Medicare for our seniors, and lowering the price of insulin if you're diabetic to $35 a month, and then persuading the private companies to follow suit. Because I tell you, my parents taught me, if there's anything that I knew was important, is if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So once you take care of that, once you make sure that Social Security, that safety net is in place, and we're able to defeat efforts to weaken it or privatize it, make sure that Medicare is solvent and provides robust health care, that's critical. But then when you go forward from there, the fact that President Biden created 12 million jobs, that the American Rescue Plan made unprecedented investments in worker retraining for the digital economy. In a digital economy, an older American is going to not necessarily have started their career during a time when they were able to work in an environment that what they'd be faced with now. And so making sure that we maximize opportunities for older Americans to take on ageist stereotypes and false assumptions is really important. And we need to vocalize those. As a policymaker, I need to not wait till people call me to tell me they're having a problem. I need to vocalize that and prioritize getting it on the national legislative agenda.
I want to speak to that question a little bit from the corporate side, right? Because too often we ask government to be the catalyst and be the safety net. But then we also expect our private partners to also be equally supportive of our older workers by offering the opportunity to engage in the workplace as they age, so they're not forced to rely on the public safety net too soon in the aging process.
Right.
What's your position vis-a-vis corporations and those on the hiring side that many of our folks have faced the biggest challenges when it comes to workforce participation?
Well, I think we all have a role to play in cajoling and encouraging employers to make sure that they're engaging in best practices for hiring. I mean, I think it is well known, the worst kept secret, that as you get older and even with a lot of experience and a long tenure in a company, that also generally means that you have a higher wage. Your salary is higher, and often you have these large corporations that kind of decide, well, we're going to sort of help this person make a retirement decision so that we can get a less expensive worker in their place, or maybe a couple of less expensive workers in their place. And so making sure that we educate employers about the kind of trade-offs that means, the length of time you have to take to retrain a younger person, rather than, really making sure that you're thinking differently about the long-term nature of the tenure of your employees. But look, it's also about creating entrepreneurship and self-employment opportunities, which can be great options for older workers, and especially those with experience and skills in niche industries. So I think we have to support entrepreneurship and self-employment opportunities for older Americans as well, through programs and resources that provide mentorship and access to capital.
Well, thank you. We have a question here from our friends at Working Nation. Now, Working Nation are one of the largest online media companies in the country. They focus on all things workforce, all things jobs training, and try to make sure the public are aware of our nation's workforce needs and training needs. So Working Nation have submitted a question. What role should the federal government play in providing job training and education programs for older workers to help them adapt to changing job markets? And what steps does the government need to take to ensure that older workers have access to the support they need?
That's a really important question, because we know that the best paths for supporting retirement savings includes high-paying, secure jobs in industries like healthcare, information technology, advanced manufacturing. I strongly support policies that promote lifelong learning for older workers. We have to work to expand access to online learning platforms and provide incentives for older workers so they can continue learning and skill building throughout their careers. You have older Americans who might face barriers to accessing training and education programs. Um, some might have lower literacy levels or limited English proficiency, and they deserve our support, obviously, as well. So we have to work to ensure that these workers have access to training programs, um, and make sure that they have opportunities to succeed uh, by building skills that they might not necessarily have started their earlier careers with.
Yes. Thank you. And from Maryland, John from Maryland. I am a small business owner and I constantly struggle to find workers. What policies are you supporting that will help small business owners?
Well, I'll just continue down that same vein of the previous question because I support increasing grants for programs that provide older workers with access to job training and continuing education opportunities. Community college programs are critical. Those are the very easy to access, and making sure that they have prioritized, reskilling, upskilling our older Americans so that they can be eligible for some of the job opportunities that are out there. Apprenticeships, vocational training, making sure that those kinds of activities are funded in our community colleges, and also that we have local educational organizations and institutions that can provide that assistance too. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, providing resources to groups like that, so that we can do everything possible to make existing programs affordable and accessible so that they can be completed on a part-time or a flexible schedule. Because obviously, if you're still needing to work, completely focusing on that skill building full time makes it challenging.
You know, you mentioned your father as a CPA who's still doing the taxes and still very active in his profession.
Yes.
And so many Americans are employed by small and mid-sized businesses. In fact, I think I read somewhere that 85% of Americans are employed by companies of less than 300 employees. Can you speak a little bit, if you can, to your position vis-a-vis supporting small businesses so they can sustain themselves and bring on more people so that they can remain employed? Can you speak a little bit to that based on your own experiences?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this Saturday I'm hosting my annual small business workshop, which is a day-long program where we have breakout sessions and plenary programs to help people who want to start small businesses or people who have small businesses already and they want to grow their businesses. And it's a perfect forum for an older American that has an idea about starting a small business. And we have nonprofit organizations, retired, as a matter of fact, the Society of Retired Executives, SCORE, is an important group that helps do workshops at my small business workshop. We have the Small Business Administration, the Women's Business Development Centers, and
Wow.
many other entities all coming together on Saturday. And we've got about 900 people who signed up to participate in these workshops. So even though, certainly I can sponsor bills, I can, bring home,
Yes.
I can appropriate resources, but I try to personalize this and make sure that I can bring as much access in a one-stop shop through this forum for folks who want to start or grow their small businesses, which certainly would include opportunities for older Americans.
And Congresswoman, you hit an important point there, because oftentimes we think solutions around workforce issues, exist in the realm of government, and you have nonprofits over here and education groups over here. But it's going to take everyone, all segments of our community, right? From nonprofits to the workforce boards to people like us, to employers, to be totally focused and also in alignment and working together to support how we provide assistance, how we provide opportunities for older workers, but also younger workers as well. That's a great.
Absolutely. And something else that's important, because I know the Center for Workforce Inclusion focuses on lower income people who or others who might have
Yes.
less access. It's why I strongly supported President Biden's plans to invest in broadband infrastructure across the
Yes.
country. And I was proud to vote to direct unprecedented resources towards internet access in the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment Act, because we have had so, I mean, if you are lower income, getting affordable access to the internet and through Wi-Fi is really, really tough. So never mind that if you live in an area that doesn't really have that infrastructure embedded in your community, particularly in rural areas. So it was critical that we make those investments. And so those are beginning to come online, and that access is beginning to be provided. The American Rescue Plan also included funding to expand access to job training programs, to create new workforce development programs focused on reintegrating
Yes.
older workers into our economy in the aftermath of the pandemic. Because look how much shortage we're
Yes.
facing with workers. What an opportunity it is to hire or reintegrate older Americans into the workforce, especially when you got young folks who maybe aren't so interested.
That's so true. But
I mean, really,
that's a good point because one of the
strike
things,
while the iron's hot.
and what became apparent to me over the last couple of years is this. At one point in the last 18 months, we had something like 10.3 million jobs that were available and 6.2 million job seekers. You had more jobs than you had job seekers, and in part
Hmm.
because the jobs that were being created were not jobs that the existing workforce and job seekers had the skills to perform.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we currently face, right? It's we have COVID has moved us 5 years, 10 years into the future of work. It was unlikely for us to be having this conversation 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
Right.
3 years ago, I had no idea what Zoom or Teams was. I now
Me
use
either.
these tools as you do every single day.
I had never heard of Zoom before the pandemic.
Right. So we're now moving rapidly into a future that will determine the kinds of employment opportunities that people will be engaged in. And so my question really is how can we prioritize within our domestic budget aggressive workforce spending? I say this because if you look at the Asian economies, we rank 9 out of 10 when it comes to workforce spending as a proportion of our GDP. Among the OECD nations, we rank only above Mexico for
Mm.
workforce spending as a proportion of our GDP. So we have to prioritize, even outside of the outlier being a pandemic, a real commitment to supporting job training, upskilling, and reskilling so that we can remain globally competitive by investing in our workforce. What is your general philosophy and belief on workforce investment in this country?
It's workforce investment is so critical for us to make sure that we can fill in the really significant voids that we have right now in the need for workers, in some cases, workers
Yes.
with at least some skills, and the job opportunities that are there. So that means that to fill that void, it's our job in the government to ensure that we're developing human capital through education and vocational training so we can complement the kinds of investments that are being made to create these jobs, but make sure that we have the workers to match those. Um,
Yes.
if you have that wide gulf where we don't have well-trained workers to fill the jobs that are available, then obviously our economy is not going to be able to uh, continue to progress
Yes.
in the way that we'd like it to. So that investment in workforce training is critical. I also want to mention really quickly, though, um, there are also opportunities, for example, in the childcare workforce,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the healthcare workforce, which has quite a lot of training programs that for many years
Yes.
have had federal and state investments in them, and those are opportunities for older Americans as well.
Thank you. We have Sarah from Chicago.
Okay.
As someone who has been advocating for the rights of workers for many years, what do you believe are the most pressing issues facing older workers in today's economy?
Well, uh, that's easy. The most pressing issue facing older workers in today's economy is making sure that they have the ability to generate revenue to make ends meet.
Yes.
We have a third of Social Security beneficiaries who only have Social Security as their source of income. Obviously, pensions and retirement benefits have waned over many years due to private sector decisions that were made. So ensuring that, like I said earlier, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, so that you can have access to good quality, affordable health care, that we strengthen Medicare and Social Security in order to ensure that. But obviously, those programs were not designed to be the only source of income. And
Yes.
so ensuring, especially as older Americans are living longer lives. I mean, you wouldn't have imagined that you would have people who are 80 plus in the
Yes.
workforce still. My dad's not an anomaly. I mean, I represent many, many 80 plus year olds who are still able to work or are in the workforce,
Yes.
or want to join the workforce. And we really need to make sure that we're not just blowing off and missing the opportunity to get that experience, and also make sure that when we're integrating older Americans into the workforce, um, our younger workforce benefits from that
Yes.
experience,
Yes.
and we benefit from that diversity.
Yes. Well, we also have questions coming in from our live stream via LinkedIn and I think Twitter and other platforms. Can I see if you, here we are, live question. Congresswoman, in your view, what additional steps can Congress take to support older workers? So many people feel they need to work the rest of their lives just to be able to afford a place to live and the necessities of life.
There's no question that we have to make sure that we focus on affordable housing. I mean, having an affordable roof over your head, so that is a worry that we take off the table. That people who are struggling to pay rent, or even to pay their, if they do own a modest piece of property, to pay their mortgage. There's too many older Americans that are very close to the edge when it comes to being able to remain in their home, and not face homelessness. There are
Yes.
many people that I represent here whose families don't live nearby, or who don't have family that can be that safety net for them. So first and foremost, making sure that people have the ability to have a safe, affordable roof over their head is so critical. And right now, we are
Next
falling
question.
short on that goal, and need to continue to make the kinds of investments that the American Rescue Plan has made, the Inflation Reduction Act has made, and we've got to have the private sector make it a priority as well.
Thank you. And next question from the live stream. Mia from Queens, New York. As someone who has been around the block a few times, I'm keenly aware of ageism in the workplace. Are there any specific policies or initiatives that you're working on to ensure that older workers have the same chances as everyone else to succeed?
Well, we really have to take age discrimination seriously. We have to take aim at it, and that includes strengthening and enforcing laws like the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, as well as promoting policies that support the rights and dignity of older workers. And I mean, that could include things like increasing penalties for employers who engage in age discrimination. We could provide additional resources to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, because Lord knows they don't have a big enough budget to actually fight all the discrimination that they have to take on. But they could be in a more robust place to prosecute age discrimination claims. But at the same time, we can fight this issue by bringing resources not only to training older Americans for the digital economy, but also to employers and hiring managers who might not be aware of the best practices that they can engage in to prevent discrimination from occurring in the first place. passive discrimination certainly takes place, where an employer may not intentionally be consciously thinking that they're discriminating, but it's just unacceptable to assume that older workers are less productive or adaptable or less adaptable than older workers. This is a stereotype, unfortunately, that continues to permeate our culture, and it lies at the root of workplace discrimination. So it's something that we have to prioritize and bring it out of the shadows into the light.
Thank you. I've been told I've run out of time, but I have one question for you.
Sure.
We live in a very polarized country, a very divided Congress. People are struggling. The future is uncertain. And you sit at a unique position in Congress where you are fighting for causes you believe in and advocating for your community. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, what gives you hope? What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the people that I represent. When I am out in my community, the opportunity to interact with people, to hear their hopes and their dreams and their fears and their concerns, to fully immerse myself in the community that I represent, and be able to draw strength from them and the kind of support that they send me back to Washington with, really gives me hope that I know my other colleagues also probably are fueled by their constituents, and then you're re-energized to go back to the Capitol and sit down and really try to reach across the aisle and work together to get things done. And not everybody is really open-minded and willing to do that. I wish we had more, and maybe a little less extremism on the other side of the aisle from me at the moment. But continue. I am a glasses half full person.
Yes.
I believe that government can be part of the solution and is not all of the problem, and that we need to make sure that we're helping to use government as a tool to help make people's lives better.
Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
It's greatly
You're welcome.
appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.